members to the April 4th, 2012 Urban Renewal Commission meeting. May you poll the commissioners here. Nancy?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Neely?
Here.
Commissioner Pauley?
Here.
Commissioner Roth? Here. Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Yates? Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
Commissioner Mum? Commissioner Edgar?
Here.
And Chair Shaw.
Here. Thank you. All right. We're going to do a presentation this evening first, and then we're going to have citizen comments. So anybody here for a comment about something that's not related to an agenda item will have an opportunity after this presentation. So we'd like to have Michelle Reeves join us.
Commissioner Shaw, if I may, I've got a brief introduction. I'd like to introduce Michelle to the board.
Okay.
Commission. Just a little bit about Michelle. She's an urban strategist with particular expertise in the redevelopment of urban commercial districts. She's most widely known for her work throughout Portland's east side neighborhoods, contributing to the creation of some of Portland's hottest new retail districts. More recently, her consulting practice helps communities discover how to renew their downtowns and commercial corridors by leveraging their existing strengths. Michelle's extensive private sector experience as commercial real estate broker has given her valuable insights into the dynamics of emerging districts and neighborhoods. She understands both the needs of small businesses and entrepreneurs who move into these areas, and the interests of property owners and developers who are working to attract strong tenants and adapt old buildings to new uses. Michelle also understands both business and property owners can most effectively partner with the public sector and residents to make vital and economically successful places. Metro's Development Center will continue to partner with Oregon City on revitalization efforts in the coming year and is committed, as I announced to this board a couple of weeks ago, to a matching grant of $120,000 to support our building improvements downtown and technical assistance for downtown property owners and businesses. We've asked Michelle to come tonight to present before the Commission a brief review of her findings from her team's work last year and to share her insights and recommendations for continued investment in the revitalization of downtown. And I felt it was important that we have her here as we're thinking about our project priorities and redeveloping downtown. This will give us some things to think about when those projects start coming in. So.
Great.
Awesome.
Welcome, Michelle.
Okay, this is going to be exciting for me. I got a mouse to operate and
Oh, geez.
well, left-handed. And then for those of you who have seen me speak, I'm normally a non-microphone speaker, so if I start getting louder and louder, just tell me to quiet down. So I wanted to, first of all, just thank Metro and city staff and Lloyd and all of your amazing downtown businesses and property owners for being so supportive and engaged in the work that we did last year. And what we're going to be doing today, as Eric said, is talking about what came out of our work together last year. And I'm going to try and give you sort of a time-lapse review of that, and then we'll go over some of the specific recommendations that came out of that. One of the things that we focused on quite a bit last year was this idea of what makes mixed-use districts economically successful. What are their characteristics? What stages do they go through? What do they exhibit in terms of economic success? And I want to share with you how I would boil those lessons down really quickly for you today. One of the first things that I would say is that downtowns are not like arterial style development, which is very automobile centered. You don't have the same type of land and parking infrastructure to allow a small downtown to compete on that same level. So if you try and mimic this type of form or use arterial tools, you end up turning your downtown into something that's kind of an in-between place. It's not a downtown, it's not an arterial style development, but what it is entirely unsuccessful generally. So it's an in-between place that doesn't function because you're not leveraging the strengths of your environment. So we're going to talk a little bit about that next. What is a successful mixed-use district? What is an environment that you leverage in a different way? So top performing downtowns, what I always say is that they're great places for people. First and foremost, that is the thing that you have to come back to and think about all the time. They are great places for people. Every design decision that you make should be made with the pedestrian in mind. And that means creating an environment where people want to walk, and you want to encourage that idea of cross-pollination between businesses. One of the best ways that I evaluate how well a district's going to do economically is how willing I am to cross the street to see what's on the other side. Because when it's a district that's doing well economically, you almost can't resist the lure to cross the street and see what is on the other side. So that cross-pollination between pedestrians is really what makes successful economic success, because that is what drives your sales per square foot in these districts. So the first big lesson that comes out of this is that pedestrians are what drive the ground floor sales per square foot in these districts. So if creating a good walking district is the key to economic health in a downtown, that leads you to the next important realization, which is you have to eliminate blanks. So what does that mean? What are blanks, and why do you have to eliminate them? Well, let me show you some pictures of blanks from around downtown Oregon City. They can be parking lots, they can be empty lots, they can be office uses that are on the ground floor. There can be areas where you have walls with no windows. It can be places that lack any sort of color or ornamentation. They can also be a road where cars travel really, really fast and where you don't feel very comfortable walking or standing. So those are all examples of blanks. So why are they important? Because pedestrians want to follow a trail of crumbs of activity and interest. And where there is a blank in that trail of crumbs, they are incredibly fickle and will not walk past it. They will not walk past a half a block of blank. And we've seen that time and again in districts. So to kind of recap, the way that I think about it is that pedestrians are the key to sales per square foot. Eliminating blanks makes pedestrians happy and creates that cross-pollination that I talked about. So what you're doing there is creating connectivity. That's really what you're doing. And that tells you exactly where you start in your district. You start in the places where you have the fewest physical blanks, because those are the areas where it's easiest to create connectivity and where it's also cheapest to create connectivity, because you're not building new buildings. And then the next thing you want to do is tenant with outward-facing uses that are going to bring a lot of identity and street dialogue. So the thing I like to remind people is that foot traffic districts can rival or surpass auto-centric arterial-style developments in terms of sales per square foot. The Pottery Barn on Northwest 23rd is one of the top-performing pottery barns in the country. And you can't park anywhere near that thing to save your life, but it does really well, and it does really well because of pedestrian foot traffic. So you create success on the ground floor by achieving a critical mass of active ground floor uses and walkers. People, when they're in a small downtown environment, they want to participate in and be a part of the human experience, and you have to provide them with an environment in order to do that. So those were the kinds of things that we went over when we were talking about successful mixed-use districts last year. So what I want to talk about next is kind of the next step, which was applying some of those ideas and thoughts to downtown. And the first thing that I like to do is start with a place's strengths. And I like to do that because I don't think that it's very productive to just spend all your time dwelling on your problems. And instead, I think you need to think about what are your strengths and how do you leverage those more effectively. So I want to go over some of the strengths that we talked about. And this is by no means an exhaustive list, but these are some of the important ones. You guys have amazing bones. You have some of the best building infrastructure in the entire region. And as you see in this picture, there are no physical blanks in that environment. That is a dream block right there. When I go into a district for revitalization and I see a block like this, I'm a little geeky, but this makes me swoon. I'm like, woo, this is so exciting. So this is really, really fabulous. You have proximity to waterfront, which is typically a city's most expensive and desirable real estate. It's not now, but it's great that you have that in your toolkit for the future, and it's something to think about sort of in the long term. You have history in your city, something that's unique and creates identity and brand, and how you decide to leverage or use that is up to you, but it's important and it's a piece of who you are, and it's great that you have that. You have two incredibly, fabulously unique features in your downtown. You have, the vertical street, the municipal elevator, which I'm going to dwell on a little bit more here in a second. And you have, and I say this to people all the time, I'm like, Oregon City is sitting on the second largest waterfall by volume in the country, and I wrote a blog post about it as well, and it's funny how many Google searches it comes up on, where people all over the world are searching on what is the second largest waterfall in the United States. Which I didn't realize before I had posted that. So a lot of people care that you're sitting on the second largest waterfall in the United States. You have a great Main Street program, and that's actually really, really important. When I work in a community, I always say that you wouldn't run a mall without a manager. I don't know why you would think about trying to run a downtown without a manager. It's a really important component to having a successful place. And you also have a great burgeoning node of creative service users in your downtown, so that's pretty exciting. So lots of great stuff here. And what we're going to spend the rest of the time doing is kind of reviewing some of the ways to leverage what you have here a little more effectively. And I'm going to have Eric pass out a map version of this on paper, just because sometimes it's a little easier to see on paper. If you want to refer to that or your screens, that's fine. The first thing that I do when I work in a district, when I start doing the analysis portion, is I create this map, and it's called a ground floor activation map. And this is the one that I used last year, so it's slightly out of date, but it's going to give us the gist of several things. Now, the reason I create this map is I want to encapsulate and look at strictly what is on the ground floor. I don't want to be distracted by anything else. Why do I do that? Because the ground floor is what is the identity of your district, comes 100% from the ground floor of what is in your building. So I want to understand what pedestrians are experiencing when they're downtown, because again, pedestrians are what drive your sales per square foot. So if you take a gander at this map, there's only three colors, because again, I want it to be simple. Red is inactive, green is vacant, and blue is active, and the white areas are just parking or streets. So I want to talk a little bit about how I determine the difference between active and inactive, because there's a little bit of a judgment call there. Any business can be active or inactive. I'm going to give you some examples of this. And this is important because active businesses are that trail of crumbs that keep pedestrians walking and interested and engaged in your downtown. So does anybody know what this is? I think I showed this picture before. It's a bank. This is one of the in-city Umpqua banks. And they open it up. They make it look like a living room. I took this picture on this day because it's closed, but it still looks pretty cool. You can go in and access the internet. They schedule events there at night. This is a great example of an active space, but it's a bank. This is not an active bank. This looks like a giant vault has been dropped down in the middle of this downtown corner, and you do not interact with, and you can't even see in the windows, and you don't interact with this at all, and it takes up a whole half a block, and it has a big impact on that half block. This is a neighborhood bar. And it's open like 2 or 3 till in the afternoon till 2 in the morning, but it's definitely a bar. This is a neighborhood bar / tavern, not active. The other one was active. This is a gas station. This is not something that's active for pedestrians, and I'm looking from the pedestrian point of view. This is a gas station that has a little seasonal display because it's right around Halloween. This is a gas station in the same town, just around the block from this. I would consider this to be an active use. I call it the cutest gas station in the Pacific Northwest. Does anybody know where those 2 gas stations were?
Lake
Lake
Oswego.
Oswego, that's right, exactly. So those are the kinds of judgment calls when I look at the map and fill that in between the green and the blue. So what is the first thing I notice after I fill this map out? The first thing I notice is you have a whole lot of red on the west side of your street. That's the first thing that I notice. And what was really interesting is I experienced that in a really tangible way. One of the first times I did a real walkthrough of downtown, I did it with some of your downtown property owners and Lloyd Purdy. It was the middle of winter. It was freezing. We all had red noses, and we were on the verge of shivering. And we're standing on the shaded side of the street the entire time until Lloyd finally says, like, maybe we should go to the west side of the street and stand in the sun. None of us had even noticed that we were purposely walking in the shade, but that's where we felt comfortable because that's where the activity was. So the red on the west side of your street is definitely a challenge. One of the first things that I would say on the west side of the street is you really need to think about how to improve your street level dialogue on the west side of the street and how to increase activity on the west side of the street. I'm going to give you some more examples of this idea of street level dialogue. Any business can be more engaging from the sidewalk and make you intrigued and interested in what's going on. This is an example here from Oregon City. This isn't a fancy building. It's not a fancy corner. I love this corner, and I use this picture in presentations with cities all over the region to say you feel like when you look at this that there's some secret treasure in there waiting just for you, and they do a great job of pulling you in. This is street dialogue as well that's effective and very simple. And this is street level dialogue at night when a business is closed. It's still contributing to the street. Does anybody know where this is? It's kind of a tough one. This is in the Pacific Northwest. This is downtown Tacoma, an area that's been renovated. That's that area that's been renovated where the University of Washington went in. And they have a lot of businesses there that are closed at night, but they're very engaging and they contribute to the street level dialogue at night. And you walk by this after dinner and you think, this is a cool store. I'm going to come back and check this out. So you're missing opportunities for doing this in your downtown here. So I talked about more street-level dialogue, particularly on the west side of the street, and anybody can be working on doing that. Also, tenanting for activity. This is a super important thing that everyone in downtown needs to be thinking about. What is this business?
Restaurant.
It's a restaurant,
cafe, yeah.
right? How do you? Can you see a sign? Can you see in the building? How do you know it's a restaurant? Tables, right. So the tables are a really important part of this dialogue that we're having from the street. Does anybody know what this is?
No.
This is a Starbucks. And they renovated this space. And this shows you again how geeky I am. I was doing something else and running errands, and I saw, wow, they renovated this space. And I was fascinated because this is a neighborhood Starbucks, and I watched everybody walk up to the building, look left, look right, pan up to make sure they were in the right place. And then they had no idea where to go, and they had to put this little planter here because this is a little dead-end spot, but everyone would try and walk in there, and nobody knew what to do, and they were paralyzed. And it took them about a month and a half to get the tables in. Same picture, here's how it looks with the tables. And all of a sudden you almost feel relieved. You're like, oh, okay, I know what that is. So tables and this dialogue and tenanting for activity are really, really important. I think restaurants are a really key thing to advertise and make sure everyone knows in your downtown and to have as much of as you possibly can. And part of the reason for that is they're very naturally active businesses on the ground floor. This is another restaurant in the dead of winter. They still have their planters and their tables out, and this is that same restaurant in the fall. So what is the one theme that you see throughout all of these pictures? There is not a single person sitting at these tables, and I did that on purpose because it shows you how much it's contributing to street level dialogue and ambiance and letting you know what's going on in that district just by what they've put outside of their business, not just with what's in their business. So that dialogue is really, really important. So to go back to this map, the next thing that I really notice, I look for discontinuity. So I look for blanks. So you can see that idea of the trail of crumbs as you look on the east side of the street here. Great interconnectivity, right? There's no blanks. So not only do we have a lot of inactive uses here, but we also have all these white spots, which are physical blanks in the walking environment for pedestrians. And that also lets me know that you have a lot of institutional type of uses, and I can tell that without even knowing Oregon City just by how the buildings are kind of laid out. So institutional uses downtown can be can be good and bad. You have to be really careful that you don't let large institutional uses sort of dominate your downtown, because then they become what we call single-use districts. And single-use districts are not economically successful, period. So you have to think about how to leverage the strengths of your institutional uses and how to mitigate some of the detriments of having a large institution. Large institutions bring money, they bring employees, and in the case of the courthouse, they bring jurors, so new people from your community who can come have a great downtown experience because they're forced to. That's a great opportunity. You should be leveraging that, right? Because this is a way to change the hearts and minds of the people who are coming to the courthouse. So my recommendations, first of all, is you've got these county buildings, which are actually great buildings that are doing nothing to contribute to street level dialogue right now. And you could change that strictly with the use of paint. And I want to give you an example. So my recommendation is paint these buildings, please. And here's my example. This is from downtown Hillsborough. And this is a mid-century, less than architecturally detailed, exciting building. All he did was remove the tree and paint it 3 colors. And it looks completely different. removed a tree, painted it 3 colors. He didn't do a single other thing to that building. It's astonishing the impact that that has. So I want you to think about those county services buildings, which are actually great buildings. If you painted them with a 3-color paint job, they would have a completely different impact on your downtown. So that's one of my recommendations related to color. The next thing is activate this plaza. This plaza is dead a lot of the times, and it's creating a big blank in your downtown. The courthouse is actually pretty great, and plazas are funny. They can be activated by their edges. They can also be activated by people walking through them. People tend to walk, though, directly in front of the courthouse. They're not really creating activity in the plaza. I would really work towards trying to create an Adopt a Plaza kind of program with different arts organizations that are in your community and have them at least in the summer, once a week. The plaza's yours, do something with it, have a show. But try and get some people to be doing something in the plaza. The next thing that I would say relates to this idea about how do you leverage this environment more effectively. So really work with your merchants to talk about how do you get employees and jurors to be utilizing your stores more frequently. What can you be doing, particularly the jurors? Because the jurors, as I said, people might have this perception of downtown Oregon City that they've held for a long time. Downtown's really changing. The only way you effectively change their mind is to bring them in and give them a great experience. So the jurors are people in your community. They're here, do something with them. So you guys need to band together and talk about how do you more effectively take that pool of people and give them a great experience, and then work with them on training. Again, creating a pedestrian environment is a challenge because the kinds of businesses, a Pottery Barn is a great example of a business that sells big things like couches and beds, but you can also buy a candle or a towel if you're on foot. And so you have some businesses that sell some great things, but they're all big ticket things. They're not things that necessarily fit in with that street dialogue and the pedestrians. So thinking about working together to leverage the pedestrians who are here now more effectively. The third thing that I look for on a map is nodes. So I look for nodes because retail districts develop around nodes, whether it's a linear retail district on a street or whether it's a gridded pattern. There's always areas of strength that develop, and over time those start to interconnect. So I want to see where your nodes are, and I look for groupings of blue. And I would say that you have about 3 nodes in your downtown. I would say I call them, where's my mouse? I'm doing this left-handed. This is your historic node, and I call this your Main Street Northern node and your Washington Street Northern node. I'm going to start. So those are the 3 nodes I've sort of identified. The Main Street Northern node is pictured here. The Washington Street Northern node is pictured here. This is the interconnection between the two. That's pretty sexy. So this interconnection is not telling me that I'm going in between 2 important nodes. This is actually a really important street in your downtown. And these 2 nodes are 2 important nodes. There's a lot of really great businesses on the Main Street Northern node. They're bigger ticket item businesses, but they're great businesses. So my first recommendation is improve 14th between the northern nodes. So having a street like this doesn't send the same message as having a street like this. So thinking about how you can make that story, changing that street environment is going to change how people address their property along that street. Part of the reason people don't really do much with their property there is the street is telling them, why would you? The next thing is to make the Main Street Northern node orient more and engage more with Main Street. So your businesses up here are either oriented on 99 or, they kind of, the car dealership wraps around 14th, but it's got nothing on that face that interacts with it. So I would think about how to make some of these businesses interact more meaningfully with Main Street, because they're not very far from the core part of your Main Street, the historic node. They're only a few blocks. But it feels like emotionally that they're, very far away, but they're not really. But one of the reasons it feels that way is because there's not a lot that's oriented on Main Street. I wanted to have a little segue here. I'm going to just flash through really quickly some before and after pictures of warehouse renovations. And I want to do that because I want you to remember that a lot of the infrastructure that you have in your northern nodes are really ripe for future adaptive reuse. I've heard in Oregon City a lot, well, someday we can rip out all of these buildings and we can build something new here. And what I'm trying to say is there's tremendous value in every one of those buildings that you have in your northern node. Right now they're manufacturing uses, which is fine, or they're sort of larger wholesale uses, and that's fine as well. But I want you to remember that it's great raw material, and it's part of the authentic fabric of your community, and it creates the kind of space that inspires the sorts of businesses that you see here in these pictures. So as you've seen, I took some of the really bad ones. There's no building that is too bad to be saved, and I think those pictures kind of prove that. So those are the northern nodes. So going back to the map, I want to focus on the historic node now. I saved the best for last, which is down there. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the historic node now. This is an amazing collection of buildings, particularly on the east side of the street, because they're all interconnected. So remember, mature districts all form by creating strong nodes that interconnect. So find ways to make all three of these nodes strong and then worry about interconnecting them. People like to develop new construction or do large adaptive reuse projects along the edges of things that are working really, really well. So the word catalyst to a developer equals bankruptcy. They have no interest in developing property in areas that aren't working really, really well. They want to work on the edges of things that are functioning optimally. So you want to take your strongest nodes that are working right now and you want to make them function at their optimal level. So let's talk about where you guys focus in your historic node, and I would break it down into three quick things: front doors, aisles, and shelving. And we're going to start with front doors. So your front doors, there's a lot of not so great front doors that don't necessarily tell the amazing story of what's in downtown visually. So I'll tell you what I think your two best front doors are. From the Mill, it's a really great front door. It's a completely neglected front door and nobody thinks about it, but that is the spot, and people have to stop there sometimes, where you can really see into downtown and see the infrastructure and get a sense of it. And then your next front door is coming off of the bridge. I think this is your strongest front door because it's also a place where pedestrians cross and cyclists cross, and it's a very local front door as well. It's not just people who are coming through the region. So my first recommendation is improve those two strongest front doors. Really look at those two spots and improve the heck out of them as much as you can. I want to say that, and I showed this when I gave a presentation here earlier, this is your front doors now. This is a picture I took of this same spot in 2006, and it hasn't changed at all. As a matter of fact, you wouldn't even know it was 2006 unless I told you. So I just offer that to you to say not a lot has changed on this front door, and there's a lot of opportunity.
Has changed. There's a few new storefronts in there.
There is. On the right, the hat store looks really great. And
a little bit.
But that actually leads me to my second piece, which is why I showed this picture, which is the elevator.
Yeah.
The recommendation is make this sing. This is an amazing, it's like functional art in your downtown. That's what you should think of this as. This is a signature piece of functional art. I threw these pictures up here because this is what I hear people kind of think about when they're looking at the elevator, and I've heard people say all of these things. And frankly, I think it's true. It's sort of scary and uninviting, and you notice the garbage cans before you notice anything else. And it's not painted well, and it's not celebrated. It looks closed. It really looks closed if you've never been in here. And it looks a little scary and prison-like. So I talked about, and this entry could just be so much more. I talked about in my last presentation that I did here this example, and I just want to share it again really, really quickly. This is a traffic circle in one of the busiest intersections in Manhattan, and they turned it into a pocket park that people love to hang out in. They made the landscaping the height where you can't see the cars, but you can still see the buildings. They put in a fountain so there's white noise and you can't hear the traffic, and they lit it really beautifully at night. So people actually go there and hang out on date night because it's this amazing little found place in the middle of this really busy intersection. So I offered that example to say if you can make a traffic circle into a pocket park, I have to believe that you can make the elevator into this amazing destination that people want to hang out in, particularly the entrance coming off of downtown and your most important entry into downtown. So front doors, very, very important. So we're going to move on to aisles now. And aisles are your streets. You've gone to two-way on Main Street, which I think is great, and I think is really fabulous. It's like it opened up Main Street. I think it looks wonderful. The one little thing with aisles that I wanted to talk about, and aisles are your streets and your sidewalks. You guys have this collection of amazing little pedestrian alleys. And again, if we take this idea of creating found places for pedestrians, places that you experience at 3 miles an hour that you don't even notice when you're in a car, even if you're going 15 or 20 miles an hour, what you do with these alleys is really, really important. So do you know what this is? This is a pedestrian alley to a parking garage in Lake Oswego. This is in the Lakeview Village, right? This is really just a pedestrian alley. You can't enter any of the stores, and at the end of that is a really ugly parking garage. And they could have made this a really unattractive walk, but look at what they did. There's windows to the storefronts so you can see. They have benches, they have landscaping, they have a little fountain for some white noise. You don't notice it until you commit to the alley, and there's a little piece of art in there for you to enjoy too as you approach the parking garage. So they've created a found pedestrian place in what is normally a throwaway place for people, but it's really enjoyable, and you appreciate that as a walker, and those are the kinds of things that distinguish pedestrian environments and make for successful downtown districts. The last thing I want to talk about is shelving. So I always use a store metaphor for downtowns, and you have to think about the same things in a downtown as you do in a store. So your shelves are your buildings, and your shelves are where you showcase your products, and in a downtown, your buildings are where you showcase your businesses, which are really your products. And the thing about your buildings is they're telling a story 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether you want them to or not. They are telling a story about your downtown. And you want them to tell a story of vibrancy and pride and activity and excitement. So things like color and lighting and not feeling a sense that buildings need to be renovated. All of those are important things. So if we look at some of your buildings downtown, particularly in some of the areas near your front doors, these are all places that are not telling the story that we're talking about. The Wood-Fired Pizza, this is a great building and such an important business to your downtown. A, there's no tables outside. B, it looks like a prison because it's gray with a black awning. And I would have no idea this was a restaurant unless I'd eaten there. And I love their pizza and their root beer floats. So I think that's a shame.
They get a lot of traffic too.
Yeah. And this building is a building I use as an example in districts all the time because I never noticed what a great building it was until I looked at the photographs. I had walked through downtown a zillion times. The architectural detail on the top of that building is stunning, and it's incredible. And it's completely lost now. You don't notice it at all. Obviously, the Masonic Lodge and the Bush Furniture Building, those are all examples of buildings that right now aren't telling the story that you want them to tell about downtown. So some examples of other, sort of before and afters. Some of it could just be done with color. You could just paint those two buildings and they would look dramatically better. These two buildings similarly. The building on the right is not fancy. Aluminum windows, there's nothing, it's just color, and it's more engaging and interesting and intriguing. Again, color, tables, this is a restaurant, we want to know. Take off that awning and put some nice color and you'd really notice that building. It's a showcase building. Obviously, this should be, I always look for in every downtown I go to, I look for the building that everyone should associate with the downtown, and when they go to it, they should say, oh, there's that building, and that's the Masonic Lodge. So it should have the impact that this building has in Old Town, and it doesn't. And the Bush Furniture Building, I use this as an example, and if you don't think that it could look this great, this is what that building looked like to begin with. So there's a lot you guys can be doing with your shelving to tell sort of a new and exciting story. So in summary, I just want to say, you're looking for connected and walkable, you're looking for active uses on the ground floor. I have to tell a really short story about this because I love it. I was speaking at the Pacific Intermountain Parking and Transportation Association conference, and I was talking about street level activity, and this slide came up, and this guy got so excited, he raised his hand in the middle of my speech and then interrupted me and said, I bought my watch there, this watch that I'm wearing right now. He was so excited and made such a great connection with this store that he had to interrupt my presentation to tell me about it. That's pretty successful retailing right there. So you want to be attractive and engaging on the outside to pedestrians. That's your metric always. And then you want to be engaging on the inside. So this is a store in your downtown. And I use this slide as well all the time, and I use pictures from this store and other places to talk about the kind of interior improvements that people want to see in a downtown. People do not want false ceilings, they don't want carpet, and they don't want bad fluorescent lighting. That is not the experience they expect from a downtown retail environment. You are competing for people's time, and you want to give them a fabulous, unique, one-of-a-kind of experience that they can only have in downtown Oregon City. And that's exactly what her store gives you. She says men walk in that store all the time to see the original floors and the original brick, and they get really interested and engaged in that space, even though she sells knitting and weaving supplies. So I really love this store, and there's sort of a million stories associated with how she outfitted this store. But it's a great example of the kind of one-of-a-kind of experience that people can get in a downtown. So that's the end. It's the speed time-lapse version of our work last year.
Wow.
So questions? Yes.
I have 3 questions,
Yes.
actually. What is the percentage of mix that you would suggest for a downtown of business types?
I don't have a specific percentage because I think it's really different. The reason I focus on a couple different things, and we talked about this before in more detail. You have to look at who can be successful in an emerging district, in a district that doesn't generate as much in sales per square foot. So you want to look for destination businesses that people go to as a part of a planned trip. And you want to use ones that are as active as possible. So food service is your most important destination business. Restaurants, if you look at most districts that revitalize, they almost always do it around the restaurant scene because people will travel for a long distance to get food. So I wouldn't think of it entirely as mixed. I would think of it in terms of your ground floor needs to be as active and engaging as it can be, even if it's a lawyer in the ground floor or a bank or whatever the use is. So you need ground floor activity and engagement, and the upper floors can be whatever, residential, it can be office. You want a mix of things up there. But particularly in an emerging district, I think it's easy to get caught up in percentages. You want as much activity on the ground floor as you can get, and you want things that are outward facing. Okay. So.
Along that line is, I'm talking about making the elevators sing. I am down that elevator almost every day, walking down that street, and what sings to me is the anger management sign. And I think I want to be on the other side of the street. I don't want somebody flying out of that building ready to kill somebody.
Yeah. Right.
And it turns me off, really, strongly.
That's a good point, yeah.
The second thing is I was down in the Pearl the other day, saw which I didn't even know was an Umpqua bank. Mm-hmm. What they had outside was a sandwich board that says, "Come in for a latte."
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They have a dog bowl outside. There's usually somebody in there on the internet. So, and that's a great example of anybody can be outward facing and engaging. There's a building on Interstate Avenue in Portland that I use as an example sometimes. It's a medical office building, which is typically one of your worst inward-facing uses because they really don't want windows and anybody, staring at people getting their medical exams for good reason. But what they did is they made the whole front of it a giant wall of glass, and then they put these huge murals that depict the history of the neighborhood, and the waiting area is directly in front of that. So it's lit beautifully at night. It's really engaging and interesting. So really any business can contribute to that idea of street dialogue.
And then how about, the last thing is, how about kind of theme neighborhoods? And what I'm, excuse me, what I'm thinking of is, there's an area in Washington, D.C. that's being revitalized on Georgia Avenue. Mm-hmm. And it's all used furniture, consignment clothing stores. And you would think that you couldn't, but boy, we went in every single store.
Yeah. I think that those things tend to happen somewhat organically. And so, as an example, the Alberta Arts District. So it developed its identity. So what you're talking about is creating an identity. Mm-hmm. And what you want to look at, and we talked about it when we were doing the work last year, you want to look at the themes that you already have in your downtown. So, for instance, you have a restaurant and food theme in your downtown. The Middle Eastern restaurant that you have on the corner of 9th. And there's no tables. Like, I would have no idea that's a restaurant. So you don't have a lot that's telling people you have as much food service downtown as you do. So that's one of the first things you need to fix, because you're in a restaurant district when you see a lot of tables outside. That's how you know. You don't know because of signs or looking in buildings. The second thing that you have is you have a lot of furniture / antiques and different sizes and kind of mixes. But that's definitely something that could be leveraged. Even some of the vintage toys kind of ties into that. There's a real theme with that. And I would love to see those retailers, and that's some of the follow-on training that Metro is looking at, working with you guys on potentially. And I don't know how much you did here with John, but you guys are looking at how to bring some more technical assistance related to how do you leverage those themes and how do you work with what's here. So there's already some of those themes happening. Right. You want to think about how to leverage them more successfully. I think it's hard to try and take an outside theme and put it on a district. You want to look at what's already developing there and then strengthen that. North Mississippi Avenue in Portland has kind of a real do-it-yourself theme. So the rebuilding centers there. There's 2 music studios on the street. There's this real sort of sense that over the years there's been different businesses of sort of small people making things. And that sort of was a real theme and connection to.
Thank you.
You know, I think before we get too far, I'd like to invite Lloyd up here too to join us, because you're part of this, Lloyd. So, yeah, come on up here and join us. You know, there's three, I'm going to get to you guys too, but there's like 3 players here, actually 2 and kind of a consultant here. But with Lloyd Purdy, he's the one that's going to have to kind of manage this for us as we go along here. And then Eric over here, he's going to have a hand in it too, because these are the people we're going to be dealing with here. So, but I wanted to kind of get Lloyd's input too as we go along here. So I'm going to call on Paul here because he's got something he wants to say.
How we don't have any residential downtown, and it's obviously it's a lack of creating a lot of activity. What's your comments on that? What do you think we could do to help correct that?
Well, long term, you obviously, to become a true 18 to 24-hour district, you have to have more residential. And the way that it typically works is you get the residential in on the existing buildings through adaptive reuse to the second floors. And if you want that to start happening, you're going to have to probably put some money behind that, because you have large institutions, and large institutions mean you have office uses. And office uses, somebody can pop them in upstairs and it cash flows and they don't have to think about it. And so it's difficult because you have that tension. So you have to find the right building and the right person who's maybe doing some renovating, who's interested in pursuing that.
But you're saying that that's a critical element that we need to
It's
we
an
need to address.
important element, and I think that you need, in terms of the order, I would have to look at sort of what your list of priorities were. I would say that you're still not executing fully on our, we talked about your front doors, and they don't look as good as they could. I would put my time and energy into that first, probably, because that's telling a story to every person who comes through your district 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Okay, we have approximately 7,000 jurors that come into Oregon City weekly, according to what, and we have a significant problem with a lot of people coming in who are disabled, and we don't have any disabled parking. We have a parking plan now that tickets everybody who tries to park like they do in Portland or any other city. So we've been creating a significant negativity. We're not winning the battle, and that's really, what do we do? What do you recommend that we can do to try to turn some of that around?
Well, I think you guys had a parking sharing plan. Or you had started to look into doing one, which I'm a really big fan of. So the thing that's interesting about downtown districts is that you have a constrained land environment. That is one of your strengths, but it creates challenges as well. So in a constrained land environment, you cannot have enough parking for every individual use. And it is actually to everybody's benefit to think about how to use parking resources strategically between everybody, because it creates a functional district which raises everybody's property values and their ability to obtain more in rent if they own it as an investment property. So one of the first things I would recommend is to more aggressively look at parking sharing, not just between the private sector or the public sector, sort of looking at all of your parking resources as a whole and figure out how to utilize them.
Well, within that mode, we have these surface parking lots, which in a sense create those blanks that you're talking about, and those and many of those surface parking lots are strategic because we don't have on-street parking, and so we're in this catch-22 world where and there's these gaps, and so when I look along the street, particularly on the west side of Main Street, and I'm going through there, a lot of what you're talking about, saying that we shouldn't have, we have, and we don't seem to have alternatives right now.
Well, so there's a couple of things about that. So the first thing that I would say is I would work towards creating a parking sharing plan that's functional. In terms of how you mitigate parking lot blanks, there are different ways to do it. The most expensive way is to build a new building on it, and you guys aren't there yet. But what you can do is look at the sidewalk edge next to the parking lot and say, how do we make that more interesting and engaging, whether it's some public art or, some other things. So the first level solution to make that more engaging for pedestrians, I would say, is looking at the edge of the parking lot, because you're not going to get rid of it right away. I see parking lots as future potential development sites. So you want to figure out how to make the edges interesting, and right now, you're using them for parking. Now, if you get your downtown so it's really rocking and rents are going up and it's a place that people want to be, then you're solving your parking problem from a position of strength. So I think that solving parking problems in advance is very expensive, and what you end up doing is create more blanks. You introduce more blanks into the environment when you try and solve the parking problem in advance. And then what happens is that you have a lower performing economic sort of district and a place nobody wants to walk, so people want to park more, and it becomes this sort of downward spiral. And downtown Lake Oswego is a great example of that. They require individual parking for every small building there. There are a huge smattering of small lots all throughout that downtown, and it is a very uncomfortable pedestrian walking experience because every building has 4 cars right in front of it, right off the sidewalk. And it's very off-putting, and it's really impacting its ability to be successful. So the way that I look at parking is you want to solve the problem in arrears, because then you're doing it from a position of strength. So you want to make downtown sing. You want to use your existing parking infrastructure as strategically as you can. And you want to make downtown as economically performing as you can, because then when you get in the new construction projects, you can afford to go underground, you can afford to build a garage, and you're also going to build the garage in the right place, because things are going to be developing, you're going to know where your nodes are, you're going to know where things aren't working. A lot of times people try and solve parking in advance, and they put the garage in the worst possible place that actually ends up breaking things up and discourages nodal development. So it is a challenge, but that's generally the approach that I recommend.
Great. Thanks.
Good question.
Commissioner Neely.
Anyway, it's kind of interesting. A few years ago, we let out some painting grants out of the Urban Renewal Agency. I think before anybody but me was on it, but one of them was substantial, and it got painted the same way it was before. I'm not going to mention it, but it's one of the buildings that you actually focused on. And we had this I thought it was great, but I think it was perhaps a little ahead of its time in terms of what it could do. But you're talking about a lot of these institutional-like buildings that may not have the architecture that you pull out, but you do on the paints. We had this mural program early in the 1990s and so forth, and I don't think we'd had one on Main Street for years and years, a new mural that's come up.
In a long time, yeah.
And it'd be nice if we could kind of leverage those kinds of things, perhaps in terms of the storefront grants, oftentimes to really change the storefront. And some of those have been very good downtown, but maybe just the right application of paint and the right theme on some of these murals to really change how it looks. It may have been a little ahead of the time on the murals because we didn't.
The murals are great.
Oh, I think
Yeah.
it was though.
Yeah, but there weren't. You still had not really much change in use in some of those areas that you're seeing right at this time.
Yeah. And I love the murals. I think they're a part of what you really discover when you're walking around downtown, and every time you stumble on one, you sort of, oh, wow, that's really great, and you connect with it, and you have a good experience. So I agree with that. I always talk about so that idea that your buildings are telling a story 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You are trying to tell a story to 3 people. You're trying to tell a story to somebody on the same side of the sidewalk, somebody who's driving, and somebody who's across the street. So the person on the same side of the sidewalk is really interacting with the storefront level, and the upper floors are sort of peripheral. The person who's driving, when you're driving, you notice color, you notice contrast, you notice things that move, and you notice outdoor displays. You don't read signs. You don't look in stores. That's all you notice. That's why car dealerships have balloons that are really bright yellow moving around all the time, because that's the only thing that you notice. And then across the street, they're kind of noticing both. Because they're walking, they're noticing the smaller details that people don't. They'll look in the business. They'll see what's in your storefront. But they're also interacting with the whole face of your building. So the murals are great, and there's some murals on these fabulous buildings, but then I get around the corner, and the story the front is telling me doesn't match the story that the side with the murals.
One of the things that occurs, we don't really have the murals facing 99 E McLaughlin.
Right.
And that would be one of the great places to really
Absolutely.
put them.
Absolutely.
Okay, Commissioner Smith.
No questions, but this is one of the presentations that you just like I could sit here all day and listen to it.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, I haven't looked at. It's so exciting,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's something that I think most of us say to ourselves every time we walk around town and look for these places every day. But it's nice to constantly have a reminder. And I guess what I'm excited to see is your trip round was a year ago.
Yeah.
I can already see what has happened in the last year based on probably what you learned from that walk, and a good example is 7th Street is one of the. I mean, when the bridge is done, for goodness sakes, I mean, what can you ask for other than? I mean, I just went to my parents' house before I came to this meeting, and they were just my dad, who is not connected with a lot of things that are going on in the city or even aesthetics sometimes, was so amazed at what was happening to the bridge right now, and because now you're starting to see elements of the bridge coming back together, and just amazed by it. And I think that Lloyd has already been talking in the last several months about the refocus on the outside of the elevator, so we can see that that's happening. Singer Falls is a project that's coming. The artwork that's coming in various places, and it's so what's happened just in the last year is starting again to pick up these little pieces, and it really is affecting what's going on downtown. And I think one of my hopes within the year is to get the Arts Commission back going. And I think the Arts Commission, we had an Arts Commission, we had a Mural Society, and they all went away. I think the key to some of the topics that you were talking about is the first step, getting the mural or getting the Art Commission back, because we are starting to install artwork again around town, and I think that could be a vehicle to get our Mural Society back. And I think that, in addition to what Lloyd's doing and what's happening in the rest of downtown, I think could be enough to completely let the business owners themselves turn the rest around. So it's really very exciting.
Thanks. I'm going to have Commissioner Paul here say something, but and then I want to have Lloyd's input when we get done here.
One last thing was we don't have any design review, and one of the things that I've seen here is the very importance of the very important world of trying to create this texture in design and color and everything that's going on, and it's just kind of like a bell ringing saying maybe this is again a reason that we should have some type of design review. We have nothing that really locks in historic review.
Right.
And so we don't have historic review and or design review downtown, and maybe from what you're saying here, we're calling it a historic district, but what are we doing to emphasize, complement, and to create value out of it by taking these bones, as you call them, and making them speak, and maybe this is an example of an opportunity for us. What's your comments on that?
Well, I have. I would separate design review from design guidelines, first of all, and I'd look at those two things differently. I have actually fairly strong feelings about design review. I think sometimes it's misapplied. I think design review is really important when somebody's building a 50-year building that's going to be in your community for a long time and have this big impact. You need to make sure they get it right. Where I think design review goes wrong is when it becomes a barrier to doing good things to your properties. So if you have a crappy old awning on your building and you have to go through design review to get rid of it, that adds $8,000, then you're never going to get rid of the moldy awning. And I've seen that happen in community after community. So one of the things you have to do is really work hard and build the relationships, like whether it's to your community through art commissions or making sure your property owners and your Main Street people and all these people are all together so that they have a shared understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. And you do that more successfully through relationships than you do by trying to legislate it. Because when you legislate and design review, what you do is make simple changes really expensive and prohibitive for people to do. The other thing that happens in Portland, for instance, they do not, historic review does not do color. They don't want to be the color police. They don't want to tell people. And yes, it means you end up with horribly painted purple buildings, but it also means you end up with spectacular buildings like the one that they did in Old Town that I showed you with that 4-color paint scheme. That is not an original paint scheme to the building time, but it's highlighting these amazing architectural features that today people want to appreciate in a different way, and so that paint scheme was very successful. So I like the idea of design guidelines, particularly as an exercise in getting everybody together to talk about what you're trying to accomplish and what you want downtown to be like. I like the idea of design review as something that is used for big, expensive, high-impact projects that don't create a barrier to people making small and important changes to their building, because that's what ends up happening a lot if it's overly...
City of Sandy has got a historic motif plan, and it seems like it's really having a positive effect on 26. And when you drive through it, you see the buildings looking more appropriate.
Well, and I think, I'm talking about sort of how these things get implemented. So I like the idea of there's a shared understanding and agreement about how you apply things. I think that what we're talking about is the mechanics of how they get implemented. Design review is just very expensive. It adds thousands of dollars to doing anything to your building. So in an emerging district, that can be the difference between somebody being able to renovate their space simply to get a new tenant in and just not doing anything and having the building look bad. So I've seen that happen in a lot of districts with overly strong design review processes. But like I said, I'm a big believer in design guidelines.
Okay. Lloyd, you're down there every day, and so what do you think about this, what Michelle has brought up here tonight in regards to what we have to offer here, too, for you down there? So
I think Michelle is spot on. Yeah. And it's worth reminding everybody here that she's been working with us, with downtown property owners, with downtown business owners for about a year and a half now, all because of Metro. Metro's brought her and other consultants and experts to us for at least a year and a half now. So we need to send an attaboy to Metro for bringing us Michelle, her guidance, her advice, and others too. Michelle's puts a lot of thought and is a true professional in this. So she's given us some good analysis. What Urban Renewal Commission is doing right is, and this is new stuff that Eric's helped bring out, is the adaptive reuse program that looks at helping property owners reformat and redo their buildings, looking at residential potentially. We know we've got one of the best facade improvement programs in the Metro region, I think. Yeah, I know Lisa Miles from Metro is always envious that we've got about, $100,000 a year or so that rolls over for facades improvements. That's a lot of what Michelle's talking about, how our buildings tell a story. And we've been working to probably raise the quality of the facade improvements so that you don't just get a proposal on the back of a napkin with one color. My message to property owners is, let's find you an architect. And that's how you get, Paul, better quality projects is hiring professionals that know what to do, hiring the architect to help get the project done. And in fact, I think Metro is going to help us continue to find some of those technical expertise so you get better quality projects to consider funding.
Hence the commitment of the $120,000 from Metro.
That's what we keep alluding to, right.
Mm-hmm. Well, what Michelle is saying, too, with the... I know this trick as an art teacher. If certain kids in the class are doing amazing artwork, you sit them next to the other students, and their artwork just goes.
Right.
And that's working.
So, I mean, doing key buildings in downtown or in the city, even with not strict guidelines, the other buildings are going to jump up a level because they will look less good next to the good buildings. And so it takes a couple great examples, and I think it kind of happens on its own.
We see that already happening.
very good.
One more thing I think I want to reiterate, because I love it when Michelle is reinforcing what I've been saying, and I use the catchphrase or the rule of thumb, restaurants lead retail. We know as a developing downtown, we do want to see a couple more restaurants come online, and then that theme that business follows beds. Michelle might not be quite convinced that we're ready for housing, but I think we probably are. But Michelle mentioned it. It's the restaurant business that's going to lead the revitalization, continue to lead the revitalization. We saw it with the Mi Familias, the wine stocks, the cypresses. We probably need to see continued investment in recruiting those restaurateurs. It makes the retail fill-in that much easier. So just some reminders.
Yes.
Also like to remind the commission that we have budgeted on my budget proposal money for the elevator. The grant that we've applied for, I think actually Lloyd has been working on that to apply for through the National Endowment for the Arts, and we're got our fingers crossed. But we do have money set aside for that. So we know about those front doors. We need to work on those more and more. And subsequent budget proposals, I will be still focusing on those, and along with the commission's encouragement, of course.
Great.
So I got to pose a question if I may.
Oh, man.
You're cornered.
We went through a thing, and just this last budget year in terms of looking at getting some designs on our alleyways, how to approach it, and one of the things that came forward was to do something in one of the alleyways, and we nixed it. I guess we wanted to see the design first, but a part of the discussion was, well, is an urban renewal agency going to do it, or are the people, are the businesses that are going to come in there to do it? I guess I'd like your take as to whether we screwed up or not.
Well, I don't think you screwed up.
Not everyone was the.
Well, the debate went that way.
I think, again, you have limited funds and you're trying to figure out the best places to put them. So I don't think that I don't think I can characterize it as you made a giant mistake or you didn't. I think you have to figure out, where to put that. And it's a little hard for me to say without looking at that list where I would put alleys on the list. But it is what I look for when I'm looking at your downtown. I'm trying to look for the things that make it different from anywhere else. And one of the things that makes it, so when you're marketing a product, you're marketing its strengths, the things that make it different, not the things that make it the same as everybody else's product. And so your pedestrian alleys are one of those special things. It is unlikely in an emerging retail district that a business is going to have any money. They can't even afford a sign. So they're not going to be doing what needs to be done to really get an alley going. I think that's unlikely. So if that moves up your priority list, then it's something that you're definitely going to have to contribute to. Maybe you could get businesses around to contribute a bench or something so they have some skin in the game, but it's not going to be probably a meaningful amount of funding.
All right. Before you leave, have you got some folks here with you that maybe introduce whoever it's...
Well, this is Lisa Miles.
Hi, I'm with
I'll let you
Development
guys.
Center. I'm Megan Gibb, also with Metro Development Center. Carlotta Collette, Metro Counselor.
Oh.
Sorry I came in late and not dressed for a meeting. I was cleaning out a rental apartment.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thanks a lot. And Michelle, great job.
Yes.
And hopefully you'll get to return here and see what we've done and go to stage 2 here or something. So.
Exciting. Thank you
you.
for having
Okay.
me.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you.
Eric, thanks so much. I don't know if you want to wrap up here or not for that, or are we okay here?
I think we're fine.
Okay, well, thanks for bringing Michelle to our meeting this evening. Okay, we're going to move on to citizen comments. Anybody want to address any items that aren't on the agenda here this evening? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to adoption of the agenda. Okay.
Yeah, let's stop it.
It's adopted. All right.
Wait.
Done. Okay. We can move on to discussion items. Use of the train depot, Amtrak station, brainstorming session. Eric Underwood.
All right.
We have a little musical interlude while we're doing this.
I'm like, is the train coming? Is that
Music by Verizon.
That's right. Sponsored by. I love it.
Way to work that in, Eric. That was
Yeah,
nice.
do what I can to impress.
I wonder why mine does not come up now.
Oh, sorry.
Get your ejection buttons.
That's right. I'm trying to tell you something.
Hold the button.
Watch that. In the right ear. There you go.
Left, right. I'm gonna take
I think we kind of spoiled him the last time we let him use that thing. Now it's going to be every
Now we're
meeting.
stuck
Jeez. Do we each get one of those, or just?
You can have one, Brian.
I'll lease it out.
I think it reminds me of something in my 6th grade.
What's his name? Tony Robbins?
That's right. It's Tony Robbins.
All right.
No.
All right. Here we
We're
go.
gonna the
My
sales
CDs will be on
presentation.
sale.
Go CDs.
So, this is basically a continuation of our brainstorming session for the train depot use. And last time we talked, we had mentioned possibly one section of the building being kind of an Amtrak patron welcome center, maybe a little museum showing some historical elements of Oregon City, and possibly some sort of snack or coffee kiosk associated with that. With the other portion of the building being some sort of business startup or business incubator. And so that's where we stopped, and we didn't get a chance to talk about any other ideas for that. And so what I've done to kind of start this conversation off is list a few other ideas that could or could not work. So we've got, again, the Welcome Center with the coffee shop / incubator, which I just mentioned. The Welcome Center plus office or commercial space for the rest of the building. Or we make it all office or commercial space, sectioning it off different areas for different offices. Flex space, basically a shell inside to lease it out to tenants who are willing to come in and make their modifications or improvements for their use, or a mixture of any of these above. And I know there's been some other ideas such as a restaurant or a pub or something like that too. But I guess we can start here with the Welcome Center Incubator. The idea behind that is to create that friendly business-friendly environment, to get businesses started here in Oregon City, to create some loyalty from the business folks, business community, and potentially generate some other jobs further down the road. A problem with that would be management. So a lot of these take a lot of management and oversight to do that. So whatever we would do, I think, at this point, with our given resources, would be very minimal as far as incubation. Office or commercial space, if you're looking at that, that's not flex space. If you're sectioning it off in the interior, you're going to have very small spaces. There's not going to be a lot of office or businesses you're going to get in there, maybe one or two, possibly three. We're looking at about 2,000 square feet total. All office or commercial space, you're just expanding your office commercial space potential there without the Welcome Center. And then again, with the Welcome Center, you need to think about how many trips that the Amtrak actually makes out there. I think it's 4. Mm-hmm. And it's going to have to be staffed. And so how is that going to work? What are the hours going to be? That sort of thing. Flex space is probably the most, I guess, would be the easiest way to go. Renovate it, make it look nice, get rid of the false ceilings, the fluorescent lighting, and then recruit businesses or commercial uses that would come in and see potential, and they would make their own improvements.
Okay, I guess I'll kind of start off here a little bit. I think the easiest thing for us staff-wise, I don't know if we've explored that, Eric, but is to actually try to advertise it and lease it. Find out if there's somebody out there who just wants to lease the thing out, and we're kind of done.
Do their own tenant improvements.
And do their own thing, whatever they want to do there and stuff, and we own it. We're getting some income off of it. As far as our manpower, I think that's the easiest thing. And the second thing was, I didn't know if somebody had approached McMinimums to see if they would be interested in doing something, or if it was maybe a restaurant or something. So that's my thought.
Well, there
Okay,
is-
Commissioner Edgars.
there is additional potential of more trips by train coming in and out because of the
Right.
there's these two new passenger trains that the been bought by the governor, part of ODOT, that they're going to be.
That was nice of him.
Nice guy.
What a great guy.
Well,
You got him just for us? I love it.
he got a little federal money.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, here we go.
Got a
Oh,
little,
it's the free
little
money.
federal money, so the whole idea is to create a lot more trips in the I-5 corridor, or bypassing the I-5, going to Eugene and back, going in this area. So if we still are on the route, when it gets re-reviewed, there could be a lot more activity associated with it. But one of the other things I wrote to you would be, I think sometime we ought to have a meeting down there with some tables and just be in the Urban Renewal Commission right inside the building, and actually be there when passenger trains come in or a freight train comes through, where we physically feel it, see it, become part of it, and look at it. Because, as an example, in my mind, I think it still has a high potential as using part of it just for railroad station, with maybe a potbelly stove and high ceilings and an old-fashioned train station type feel, but warm and inviting, and maybe something with that ties into it. But even at that, we have underneath the building this huge amount of space that could be floored off to in a manner that would be adequate to DEQ. I perceive it. I've tried to advance that idea to find out with Nancy or with DEQ what could physically be done, so as that if we could wall up or stem wall up and create, take all the space under the platform, not, in the case like of bicycle tourism, where it might be used as a secure place to store bikes or parts, or something that would be happening like that would be part and tie into the transportation. So if somebody's riding from their house, rather than taking a car to the train station to go into town, they're riding a bicycle down there, but they have a secure place where it could be locked up underneath underneath that huge platform. So there's opportunities, and somewhere I think we could be more sensatory if we actually had a meeting down there and we were there and feeling it, and then maybe that would also come up with some new ideas.
So I agree with Paul's point about being in the building and letting it speak to us. What the train depot speaks to me is transportation, a total transportation theme. So encouragement of the bicycle shop to come there, the train depot welcome station, maybe even a little display of historic transportation themes, and just go on that transportation theme, do the obvious. And I think it really could facilitate that building and utilize it.
So,
rent a car.
rent a bike.
Not what I was thinking of.
So
That could work,
The
though.
whole time.
That could work.
oh,
More so than a bike.
Nancy,
okay.
I think
I think probably the thing we have to look at is, do we want to have it as a revenue source, or are we going to have kind of a nonprofit thing going on in there? So
We need money.
If it was a state-of-the-art bicycle shop,
Yeah.
that would certainly be a revenue
Okay.
source.
that's
Good.
another
All
question.
right,
too.
okay.
And a destination point.
Yes.
good.
That's another
Commissioner
question.
Neely.
Yeah, I agree with the revenue source, and I think both Paul in terms of recommending us getting down there, and Carol in terms of having the transportation focus. I'm glad the direction went that way. Then our chair's recommendation, let's just lease it and get some revenue. I think we need to lease it, but I think we need to find the right kind of leasing.
Yeah.
Have a focus,
Yeah.
Theme to it
Leaser.
a theme.
Are you a leaser
Okay.
or a leasee if you're
that
leasing?
ties into part of what we're.
And you're, I'm leasing, I got it right the first time.
Okay. Commissioner, okay. Oh, yes.
I wanted to speak to the use of this space underneath the platform, underneath the building. By our DEQ no further action closure agreement, we cannot allow it to be used. It has to be fenced off and locked fenced. Because the idea is, one of the reasons why we got a no further action is we've capped the soil underneath the building, and to limit any kind of exposure, those are the rules. So that's just
Okay.
the way it is.
All right. All right.
But above that, it's great. So, and there's also floodplain implications if you start talking about walling it off.
Right.
But bottom line is that we have stipulations on that part of the site
All right.
that we have to comply with.
Thank you, Nancy. Commissioner Peterson.
Well, I like the idea of kind of the dreaming big, but I can see some of these uses as being kind of costly. So that's actually like a drain or needs staffing. Like at it being a train station, I can see that creating maybe some headaches and management issues. And how do you make that secure? Does it now become a blighted area if it's not staffed? So I want to think about those type of things. I also want to think about, if we're going for a bike shop, that involves a private business person making that decision. I think being down there is helpful, but with the leasing, having a targeted focus helps because you can target to that niche. But you also have to leave a certain amount of flexibility because you can't drive that. You can't self-impose too much on a tenant exactly what they are, or you may end up with space sitting there for a long time. And then from a cost standpoint, you almost don't want to take it too far. You want to have maybe a vanilla shell, or you want to have a space. I haven't seen what it looks like, so it's hard to.
It's pretty chopped up inside, and it's 1968 all over again.
Yeah. So there may be some things that could be left there. There may be some things that we can say we've got a budget to do X,
right?
But let the tenant kind of drive what they want to use.
Do we really want to have a meeting, or can we just walk through? I mean, do we need to have a meeting there?
At least a tour.
A tour is what I was thinking.
I don't know if there's a room big enough in there.
I know, that's what I'm kind of wondering.
The main room is probably big enough. If you walk in, it's probably fine.
Why don't we just arrange a tour at
Yeah,
future
I
work
think
session?
yeah, that would
About
be
the time
great.
If there's
the train,
enough room there, we can.
The train's got to come through there at that time, Mr. Fraser.
But
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
good.
Mr. Fraser will arrange the train to stop at the same time we're touring.
if I may add,
Okay, Commissioner Peterson, we still rolling down there?
Just one more thought. So if we were going to do an interpretive type center, you can do something that's it's almost like a window display. There are ways to do it that way. There's, in terms of coffee kiosks, I think there's probably some sort of vending automated type of thing. So there's some automated type things, or there's some things that could not cut into our square footage too much in terms of we want to have a cultural display so that people that get a sense of what Oregon City is about when they stop. There are ways to do that don't. They're going to have some initial costs, but they're not going to have a huge ongoing cost and create a headache.
right.
So we can kind of have our cake and eat it too, if we want to go that direction. So.
Okay, Commissioner Roth.
Yeah, I was going to mention on the bicycle thing, the ones that I'm seeing, there are no people involved. It's automated. You just swipe your
The
card.
bike
and-
rentals, yeah.
Portland,
Yeah, and that's one of the things that Blaine had proposed as well. So
Okay. Commissioner Smith.
So along the same lines, I think I can't remember how the building's broken up, but you take a small piece of it on the what would be the north side, and I see very much an office there that could become a ticket booth at some time, but at this point could be definitely displays. I could see, rather than someone sitting there to answer historic questions, that you have a television monitor that plays a loop of here's how to get to these things in Oregon City, and even if it's a little bit interactive or something, I think there's ways of easily doing something there that anyone that gets off the train can say, oh, well, wow, this is what's here and where I can get there. Because one of the things that we've talked about even today in a tourism meeting, we have these some fairly good signage around Oregon City now, more than we did. But there's still missing components. There's no signage from the Amtrak station to connect you to the signage, or from the entrance of the city to connect you to the sign. So to pick up on those arrow signs around Oregon City, you have to be leaving one particular place to do that, and I think we have to fill in those links too. But and then I really see the rest of the building being kind of open to whatever comes. I think it would be ideal if it's tourist related kind of a service, or even a coffee shop or whatever would work there. But it's so you almost kind of have to offer it and see what comes, because it's such an isolated place. I mean, it's going to be a big risk for anyone to go there unless something else happens in conjunction with the Interpreter Center across the street or something to tie it together now. But
So on that note, if I could add something with that, we have some funds in the urban renewal budget right now to do some design work, interior design work, and some tenant improvements also. So I think we need to think about, if we're going to lease it, it is in a remote area. It's really not that attractive to a lot of different businesses out there. One of the ways to make that more attractive, rather than say, okay, this is a remote area, open the doors, and then they see what it looks like inside right now, you're going to lose your potential there, I think. They're going to have to put over more money to renovate that. Whereas if we can leverage that somehow in the district, make some minor improvements, make it a shell, open enough where they can come in and say, well, I can spend this amount of money to make these improvements here to make it work for my business. I think that makes it more marketable in the end. And we're probably going to get a better tenant that's going to be more profitable, I would say.
Okay, Commissioner Moon.
Have we ever had a traffic study on how many people actually go into the parking lot, or?
Not that I'm aware of.
I think that would be kind of good for any tenant possibility. They would probably want to know how much activity there would be if there was,
Could be a marketing tool.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
Food for thought.
Food for thought there. All right, so I think an idea might be, Eric, is to get an idea how much that would cost to do, to have that a more marketable structure.
Strip out some of the walls and try to create more of that shell, open shell.
Something that'd be more attractive to a tenant. And at the same time, Commissioner Peterson, do you think it's a good time now to kind of market that? Or now I understand, you've got spots on the radio now and stuff, is that train station, is that part of that?
No, that's just for the 10th Main and 12th and Main.
All right, so do you think it's time to try to market that, or should we wait till we have the
Let's wait till we do a tour and have some discussion.
Let's do a tour,
okay,
yeah.
We'll do the tour
Yeah.
first. All right, cool. So, but in the meantime, if you want to get some costs together to get that building kind of stripped out and make it a little more pleasing inside to market it.
Okay.
Okay.
What are some of the historic nuances of the building that would make it excite somebody?
Yeah.
What do you?
We'll find that out when we're probably down there, won't we, on the tour? You'll point those out to us.
Mr. Design Person. Come on.
Bring my board down. I'll start drawing. Okay, good. So, what do you think, Eric?
That gives me my marching orders. I can proceed with that.
Good.
So that sounds good. And
All
then
right.
I'll come back with the cost.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Thanks, sir.
Have you had any response to your radio?
I've had a few calls, and they've asked about the type of development. I'll admit the first call that I had was from a gentleman who wanted to purchase the 10th and Main lot and make it a parking lot and sell it back to the county. So he hasn't
Okay.
called back.
All right, good. Thanks, Eric.
Well, there's always something.
All right, so was there any other discussion on everything? Everybody okay? Let's move on to general business, urban renewal project prioritization. Eric Underwood.
Yes. And I don't have to go back to my microphone because I got one of these.
That's right. All right.
His favorite microphone.
Yeah. Well, this is just I've put together, we had our special work session on Monday night, and I came up with priorities for the next fiscal year, along with our 6 core values that we've established, and I've just put that into a work plan format, and you should have it in front of you there. Hopefully you've reviewed it. But I'm bringing it forward to you tonight, as I promised Monday, for approval, so we can begin implementing.
I'm not seeing, I
Yeah.
don't think
Here.
I'm seeing.
I don't see the actual document.
No. And I didn't get it at home either.
No, I didn't get it either.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Well, let's see.
Documents, Mike, commission report, review document.
Well, then we might have to do this another meeting.
Can get it really quick for you. We'll get it really quick for you.
His comment was good.
Yes.
Another meeting.
I'm just looking at the timer.
We will get it for you in 1 second. I don't have to. I'll forward it to you, Kelly.
Mr. Chair, I think this may be just a way for Eric to circle back and touch base with you, because I do know that you've all talked about these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost a or a consent calendar type of thing, but I do think it's important to get that in front of you before. And since we had the meeting, I'm guessing what's happened here is that there was very little time between the meeting and tonight.
Yes.
when you
yes.
reached the
So,
consensus.
meeting, I worked on it right after the meeting and Tuesday morning, and
It didn't get forwarded. So we're
Okay.
going to get that out to the commission and then get it on your next agenda.
Okay.
yeah.
Very good. Now, we have a budget committee meeting coming up, don't we?
Yes.
Yes.
So are we
24th.
kind of prepared for that, I guess? Is that, are we getting anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, the project prioritization helps.
That's kind of-
helps with
okay,
the budget,
so that's
I'm
gonna
able
be-
to make some tweaks, and yeah.
What date is that?
It's on the 24th.
24th. Okay.
Excuse me, do you need to have that approved before that time?
I don't think so, because we've already talked about
There
it.
haven't been any changes other than just putting it in a different format.
Yeah. Okay. Are we all good with that? Okay. All right. Then we can move on, Eric, to the minutes of March 7th for approval.
I move for approval.
Second.
Question? Nancy?
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Pauly?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum? Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
And Commissioner Peterson? Commissioner Yates, or excuse me, Commissioner Edgar?
Aye.
And Chair Shaw?
Aye.
And passes.
We'll move on to item C, minutes of March 21st. Need approval?
To approve.
Second.
And question? Hearing none?
All in
Nancy?
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed?
All right. You know what? I think we even get to hear the city manager report tonight.
Nothing to report tonight.
I worked hard to get this done until 6:30, so we hear something.
Try to rush this and we're
Nothing, right?
Raise your hand.
Very little.
Okay.
Excuse-
All right.
I believe Eric had
Oh, I'm
something
sorry.
for.
Wait, I've got one thing here.
Okay.
I almost forgot. I'm getting even with you for not having that thing on the in the packet. So this is a very cool ad that Eric's going to pass out that we wanted you to see before it went to print, and he's got copies Is that right?
Yeah,
Nice.
I have copies here.
Oh, good.
So this is just an ad campaign that we're doing in a national publication. This is the publication. It's called Business Expansion Journal, and it just came out. And we're going to be running this in 4 different issues coming up. So it goes all over to developers and economic development communities all throughout the nation.
Great. Okay. The only final thing I've got this evening, I just wanted to congratulate Nancy Kreschauer for a great bridge move this past couple of weeks.
And of course, the Alita.
Yeah, it was not, many people made that happen.
I understand, but we were kind of intimately involved with that, so
Yes.
we appreciate all your efforts on that, making that nice and smooth. Okay, anything else this evening? Hearing none? Meeting adjourned.